A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
Asan Kaygy, Until Eternity, the bringer of truth. Witness to an era, the path to the future, living in legends. A pearl which is concealed in the sea is thrown on the shore by a hurricane. Wisdom is revealed in grief when the heart withers from its wounds. By Asan Kaygy. We're still retelling and memorizing these words by heart. Isbek Abilmazhinov touches the strings of the dombra, and words take him deep into the centuries past. Only legends are left of him, although he was a real man. And he lived in an era when some empires had collapsed and others arose. He himself helped create new states, and one of the most mysterious personalities in the history of Kazakhstan is Asan Kaygy, the Sad Asan. He was mostly worried about the fate of the people. He was a spiritual leader, some sort of secretary of state of his era. Yes, he was the main advisor of Kazakhstan and Janibek. He sought the promised land, Zheryik. Chapter 1. The Bringer of Truth. If each of the singers wanted to represent their own kind in a more favorable light, then Asan Kaygy was the wisest. His songs were bottomless and sad, and as a mighty river absorbs countless streams, they absorbed the hopes and aspirations of all Kazakh families and tribes. From Ilyas Esenbelin, The Concealed Sword. In an ancient capital on the shore of the Ili, Janibek Sultan, his brother Kere, Koblandi Batir, legendary characters of real history, on the set, even the assistants in the costumes of 15th century. The exceptions, perhaps, are only camera people. And the director. The film Kazakh Khanate, The Golden Throne. This is the throne which was in Signak, the first capital of the Kazakh Khanate. The foundation of this throne was laid by their great-grandfather Urus Khan in Ak-Orda. The 21st century blended with the 15th. Steppe Amazons rest in the tent, warriors take selfies, and Koblandi Batir is in the backdrop of the Horses of Iron. But one of the key characters is not on set today. I've heard about Asan Kaygy from childhood. Asan Kaygy was a poet and philosopher. Gérard, who, by the way, mostly played the sacred kobuz, from ancient times it was believed that Gérard were marked by God. They were intermediaries between the people and the spirits. Aruas, they're not afraid to tell the truth. Gérard write history of the people, and they were called prophetic poets. It was believed that they can foresee the future. Perhaps that's why many of them became advisors to the Khans. The duties and burdens of Gérard were not easy. They tried not to talk about their problems, but about the sorrows and needs of the people. This is different from other poets and storytellers. Do not scold your time. The itch of perfection is a lie. Don't get upset with the argamak. You won't find a better horse. From Asan Kaygy. Kazakh traditions preserve the image of an honest man, bold and uncompromising. There are a lot of legends about the philosopher Asan, and it seems that many of them developed during his lifetime. But there's not enough of reliable information. Chapter 2. Witness to an Era. It's said that Asan Kaygy was a physically strong person, trained in military science and well-educated, and, most likely from childhood, he understood all the subtleties of hunting. How hard is it to train such birds? A month or two, maybe more. It all depends what kind of bird you train and what it should do. According to legend, Asan's father was Sayatchi, a hunter and an animal trapper. Hasan Sabituli, presumably this was the real name of the poet, led his family from the famous Kaygy, one of the advisors of Genghis Khan, who traveled with him in one cart. Genghis Khan, when he was a child, ran up to the Kerulen River and the Altai. 12 bees, led by Kaygy, went looking for him to persuade him to become a Khan. Finally, they found Genghis, they built a cart which harnessed 11 bees, and Kaygy sat next to the Khan and became the first bee. Legend of Genghis Khan's election by Grigory Potanin. Asan was born in the 60s of the 14th century. So, the time of his youth and the maturity just happened at the time when the next redistribution of the world. The Golden Horde is going through hard times, defeated by Tamerlan, and the once unbreakable state was divided into many khanates. A series of troubles and the arrival of false leaders was the end of all the formation of national states. This refers to the Uzbek Khanate, the Kazakh Khanate, the Nogai Horde, and others.
То есть имеется в виду того же узбекского ханства, казахского ханства, ногайской орды.
And Asan was not just a witness of these historical events, he participated directly in them. So where are we now? Well, this is the Golden Horde city as we consider Sarai, the correct name of Sarai al-Makrus, which means God's palace in Russian. Sarai Batu is the wrong name. This arose in literature later. Just a 2-hour drive from Astrakhan, according to one of the versions, this city was founded by Khan Batu. Today, it's a settlement of Selitrinoi and an object of study of archaeologists. 120 kilometers north of here, there's another city, the second capital of the Golden Horde, Sarai al-Jadid, the new palace. There are solid traces of the destruction. It's believed that Sarai al-Jadid was destroyed by Tamerlan. It happened about the time when Asan was about 30 to 40 years old. It's likely that he was a witness and was born in one of the Golden Horde capitals. Perhaps Asan Kaigy was born not in the city itself. His father was a bird trainer and a real Sayatchi. He caught golden eagles and educated them, so he must have been living close to nature. Another assumption, his father Sabit lived on the bank of the Sirdarya in the Aral Sea, where he was engaged in hunting. This version is a bit different, the native land of the nomad philosopher in the Caspian region on the shores of the Urals. At least, we know that he had been here many times. The fact that he lived in our region is a historical fact. Whether he was married or had any children is still unknown. Only legends remain. In one of them, it was predicted that Asan would find his fate in the waters of the Irtish, and it came true. He met the daughter of the river Sultan. But he did not fulfill the request of his betrothed. She turned into a bird and flew away and took her unborn son with her. Since then, he was called Sad. Presumably, this is a poetic transcription of the story of lost love. Allegedly, Asan's beloved wife, the daughter of one of the bees, died during childbirth. Chapter 3. The Path to the Future. And then the incredible happened, writes Ilyas Esenbelin. The Khan, before whom the enemies trembled, bowed in a deep bow before the old folk singer. This had never happened in the steppe. And the words of greeting he said are not the one the Khan should say. Hello, grandfather Asan. According to an ancient custom, they hug each other 3 times over their shoulders, like people doing the same thing. Unite the Kazakhs and fight for the land of your ancestors. Semireche for us is the promised land. If not for you, then for the descendants it will bring happiness. From Ilyas Esenbelin, The Concealed Sword. It's interesting that when Asan became advisor to the Khan of Janibek, he was about 100 years old. It's said that he was at first an influential bee, and for a time he lived in the capital of the Golden Horde. And then he was an advisor to Ulu Muhammad, who founded the Kazan Khanate. According to one of the versions, Asan's mother was the sister of Ulu Muhammad. After his death, Asan returned to Desht-i-Kipchak. And again, the time was troubled. The Sultans Kere and Janibek left the Khan Abul Khair. It's interesting that according to one of the versions, which the writer Ilyas Esenbelin adhered to, it was Asan Kaygy who advised Janibek and Kereya to move to Semirechye. The first Kazakh tribes, headed by Kere and Janibek, settled in the area between the Volga and the Urals, but then migrated. There are wild deers in the steppes, and the silverfish play in the shallows of great rivers. And people do not know what famine is. By Asan Kaygy. Asan Kaygy begged to stay here. Here, it was a rich natural condition. Well, apparently the Kalmyks and the Bashkirs did not allow any rest. And when people left to the banks of the Chu River, where the living conditions were much more difficult in terms of climate and for livestock and for people, but the most important wealth was that on the banks of the Chu, where peace and quiet, where people needed. To unite people, so they will live in peace and prosperity, was his utopia, his city of the sun. He spent most of his life in search of the promised land. According to the surviving legends, the philosopher traveled a lot. He was in China, Kashgar, Crimea, and even Moscow. And when he was already over 80, he saw all the land of his homeland. More precisely, he traveled on his camel, Zhelmaya. It seems that Asan Kaygy had a great work about Zherayuk. Born of a dream of the happiness of the people, it's difficult to say whether it was in the form of a Tolgao or Zherao, or it resembled the utopia of Thomas More, or the City of the Sun by Campanella. The legends that have come down to us are apparently the remains of his philosophical work, which turned into legends. Mukhtar Magay. He traveled all over Kazakhstan, seeking the promised land, Zherayuk. And he compiled an oral geographical atlas of the new state. The Chu River, the swamp, the children could be ill. Karatau, there were no birds except the cuckoo, no smells except the smell of weed. Sirdarya, the upper reaches are rich, but there's not much room for them. And so, it's about many regions. He was looking for not just an ideal place to live, he was looking for a way into an ideal future and was not afraid to tell the truth. The people's favorite, an informer of folk's thoughts to the ears of the Khans, and in the opposite direction, the thoughts of the Khans back to the people. His words were better than weapons. Without me, you won't know the truth, and without truth, people will suffer. Asan Kaygy, addressed to Janibek Khan. Still, most researchers tend to believe that the story of Asan Kaygy is the story of the lives of several people. When we're talking about Korkut or about Asan Kaygy, after all, these are also collective images, images that in themselves nurtured the idea of finding a fertile land, a promised land.
Образы, которые в себе вынашивали идею поиска благодатной земли, земли обетованной.
Epilogue. Living in legend. He's been living more than 100 years in the world, and perhaps people could not even imagine that he was mortal, writes Ilyas Esenbelin. According to legend, Asan Kaygy died when he was an old man. He was more than 100 years old, and he was buried in the Ulyatau Mountains. But exactly where the great philosopher died is also unknown. At least 3 places are suggested. In our film, Asan Kaygy also gives the main directions in all scenes, and by the end of the 2nd season, he went away, no one knows where. He said that he had fulfilled his mission. According to the legend, he could not die until he'd fulfilled all that he was destined to do. And these are people who left their descendants with the hope that when a difficult day comes and they are in danger, they will come back. What in life is considered a misfortune? The steppe where there is no place to herd is a misfortune. A kind word that we didn't have time to say is unhappiness. Asan Kaygy.